All of you, at least in India, it's time of evening. It's my pleasure to extend a cheerful welcome to you all for being with us on the occasion of the inaugural function of International Webinar on Language, Literature, Culture and Pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought about seismic shift in all spheres of life, and language, literature and culture are equally disrupted. The process of teaching, learning is severely affected by the lockdown, and social distancing norms have forced by the pandemic. Teaching of literature is not a mechanical process. Literature teaching involves experiencing and sharing of emotions and needs applying aesthetic sensibility. It requires emotional engrossment on the part of teachers and learners also. However, it seems to be a challenging task for both the teachers and learners to fully understand the essence of the literary text using online tools, which have become unavoidable means of education during pandemic and will prevail sometime after pandemic also. Therefore, it has become the dire need of the time to come out with effective solutions to the plight of language and literature teaching so as to facilitate the process to be more rewarding. I appreciate the overwhelming response given by the participants across the globe to this webinar. I am happy to share with you all that 1,740 participants, not only from all the states in India, but from the countries like Philippines, Nigeria, Sudan, Iraq, Yemen, Egypt, Bhutan, Nepal, East Java, Kuwait, Indonesia, Malaysia, Oman, Sri Lanka, even Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Burundi, Trinidad and Tobago, Bangladesh, Palestine, Gambia, Borno, Morocco and some others have registered their names for this webinar, and right now they are with us watching the YouTube live streaming and on the Zoom platform. To tell something about our college, Karmayur Baharao Patil Mahavidyalaya Pandharpur, Maharashtra, India is one of the 769 branches of Raj Shikshan Sanstha Satara, which is one of the premier educational institutions not only in India but in the Asian continent, founded by the great visionary Padma Bhushan Dr. Karmayur Baharao Patil. This year, we have completed 100 years of educating socially and economically downtrodden strata of the society. We are continuously achieving new milestones under the able leadership of former Union Minister and President of the Sanstha, Honorable Shri Sharad Pawar Sahib, and Chairman Honorable Dr. Anil Patil Sahib, and other office bearers of the Sanstha. On this occasion, it's an honor for me to introduce you to the guests of the International Webinar on Language, Literature, Culture and Pandemic. So once again, I welcome you all, and I'm happy to share with you that we are fortunate enough to have with us the chief guest and the keynote speaker, Dr. Gerald Kapchik, who is a professor from University of Toronto, Canada. He was president of 3 international organizations, including the International Association for Empirical Aesthetics, 1990-94, Psychology and the Arts of the American Psychological Association, and the International Society for the Empirical Study of Literature. He received the Rudolf Arnhem Award in 2010 from the American Psychological Association and the Gustav Fencher Award in August 2018 from the International Association for Empirical Aesthetics, both for distinguished research and service. His research interests include literary and visual aesthetics, design and imagination process, emotional experience, and social communication. He published The Aesthetics of Emotion, Up the Down Staircase of the Mind-Body in 2016, published by Cambridge University Press. His papers can be found on ResearchGate and his lectures are available on YouTube. So I welcome you, sir, on this platform, and we are happy that we are with us you are with us today. Now, I will introduce the president of the inaugural function, our beloved principal, Dr. Kundalik H. Shinde, who has more than 20 years of experience as a principal in various colleges affiliated to various universities and the branches of Raj Shikshan Sanstha. He also has worked as Joint Secretary of Higher Education, Raj Shikshan Sanstha Satara, which is our parent institution. It is due to his support and encouragement that we could organize such events. So I welcome you, sir, for this inaugural function. I welcome you all on this platform, as well as I welcome all the participants and delegates who are watching the live streaming of this webinar on YouTube. Now it's the time to listen to the words by Honorable Chief Guest and the keynote speaker, Dr. Gerald Kopchik. So I request you, sir, to enlighten us. Over to Dr. Gerald Kapchik.
Dear friends, thank you so much for inviting me. We can't get on an airplane to meet each other, but sometimes Zoom can make us friends and bring us from around the world to share meanings. Yes. I want to thank Dr. Shivaji Sargar and my dear friend Ashok Sakdeva, who suggested I do a lecture. I was trained initially I'm Canadian, but I was trained initially in the United States in part in health psychology. And my supervisor, Professor Howard Leventhal, involved a common sense model of healthcare with two themes that are relevant to today's concerns: danger control and fear control or emotion control. In the face of individual stress and now international crisis, we have two issues that we have to address. How do we practically preserve ourselves and our communities, our families? And how do we deal with this helpful information? And at the same time, how do we control our fears and our anxieties? Now, I'm going to build a bridge between this and the study of literature. In March and April of 2020, I initiated a study with a young Chinese student who's in the United States on sharing of real and fake news, because this is so important during the pandemic. And so we looked at real and fake news that was either fact or fiction. And the data show that people are disposed to passing along real news on a negative theme. And Darwin is therefore present, because when we find a threat, we face a threat in our communities and as individuals, in which we receive information that signals danger, and we can discern that it's real, we pass it along. The Darwinian model preserves us. At the same time, what we discovered is that as the pandemic was moving along in the United States, hope became a concern, and people were more discerning when consuming information on social media platforms to determine that, in fact, it was real and not fake. Now, turning from this, the pandemic offers us both constraints and opportunities. Constraints because we all face the reality the University of Toronto is functionally closed. I teach my classes online. I work with my 10 research students online, but yet we have contact in the same way that I have contact with you and dear friends and colleagues around the world whom I would never normally meet. So there are opportunities in the midst of fear. Now, as a person trained in aesthetics, I want to step back into the 19th century. And I want to put on the table a theme that is a leitmotif of today's concerns about teaching, literature, and the challenges that we can face during the pandemic. In particular, the distinction between the formalist approach to literature and what we can call a projectionist approach, a battle between thought and feeling. The formalists, primarily in Germany, and the concept of empathy in the West comes out of Germany, the notion of Einfühlung, feeling into. So there was a battle between two worlds that carries into the 20th century, indeed into my own research. The formalists maintain that the structure of the text is doing the job, And our goal as teachers is to help students, and mentioned right at the outset, to understand, to appreciate the essence of the text. The opposite view, the more emotional view, the projectionist view, emphasizes the theme of personal resonance and collective resonance. To what extent is this literature meaningful to me? It's not so much a concern for the truth value or essence of the literature, but my relationship to it. And the extent to which I find myself in the characters, I find myself in the situations or the episodes that unfold, the work is so much more meaningful to me. And of course, both groups are correct. Indeed, there are structures to literature and painting and music that we can analyze over time. How did these ideas change? How did the themes change? How did the styles change? And yet, at the same time, what is my relationship to the work? How deeply can I penetrate it? Indeed, this battle between thought and feeling carries over into the 20th century in my community. One of the organizations I became president of, the International Society for the Empirical Study of Literature, began in the mid-1980s. And I went to the inaugural meeting. And as it turned out, it was initiated by professors from Germany and the Netherlands who were still angry at their high school teachers who told them there was only one way to understand the text. Indeed, in America, reader response theory, and in Europe, reader response theory emphasize the importance of individual and collective interpretations of work, because works evolve over time. It may have been written by Shakespeare, but yet what is its meaning for us today? The Aristotelian theme about tragedy that involves both catharsis, the releasing of emotions, and yet the awakening of universal thought is as true today as it was more than 2,000 years ago. So these are the themes that I'm bringing with me to a concern about the pandemic. How do we relate to research? How do we relate to works of literature, works of culture during a pandemic, both in terms of their essential value and awakening to our relationship to them through acts of interpretation, through themes of resonance? And this theme of resonance is as real in Chinese culture as it is in Western culture. It is as real in Asia and Africa, the Middle East and Europe as it is anywhere else. So this is what I want to turn to now. So remember where I'm coming from. I'm coming from early training that focused on healthcare, the need to control our thoughts in cases of danger, to be practical, to maintain social distancing, to wear masks, to be sensitive to others, at the same time, to look at our own emotions and to develop a relationship with them. And I brought this through the domain of aesthetics from the 19th century, where there was a concern for the essential meaning of the work, the formalists, and on the other hand, the more resonant-oriented projectionists. I have a relationship to the work. Both themes are as real today as they were in the 19th century, and as they were even to Aristotle, and even to the literary critics of 9th century China, who talked about different themes to which we must become sensitive in poetry and culture. Now let's turn to the theme of motivations for reading, a theme that we can deal with in a broad way. We can read for meaning, we can read for action, we can read for distraction. In the 1990s, I conducted research with Professor Janusz Laszlo of Hungary on the theme of reading. How do we move through the text? And we saw, of course, as we all know, that when we read an action-oriented text, we race to the end to find out what happened. But when we read for meaning, when we read with the sensitivity to personal growth, we slow down. There are different paces of reading. There are different depths of reading. And this is a theme that is relevant today. Surface versus deep reading. Are we just on the subway? Are we on a train? Are we on a bus? Are we racing through because we just need to pass the time? Or do we slow down? Do we read deeply in the text? Do we read it a second time? not so much concerned for its essence alone, but what it conveys in relationship to our own lives. Both themes are real. It's not one team, the formalist versus the projectionist, but indeed works of literature that are sustained over time, have an essential structure and meaning, and are written in a way that bring us in. This theme of aesthetic distance is fundamental in the psychological study of aesthetics. I cannot recommend enough the classical work by Edward Bullock, British Journal of Psychology, 1912, on distancing, his concern for engagement, the literary work that engages us in whatever language my audience is encountering the work. We need the proper balance between the text, our engagement with the text, and yet we know that we are outside of it. And we choose, as Coleridge told us, to have a willing suspension of disbelief. We are prepared to, we agree to enter in. We agree to, and here's my point, have a relationship with the work. And the relationship with the work that gives us essences, that touches our concerns individually and as cultures, in groups or nations, is what builds the enduring relationship. Is this not our goal as teachers? Is this not our goal to bring to our students, whether in our presence or in remote learning, to Northern Canada, where people cannot easily go, or in all the different parts of our world where we're trapped by the pandemic? Is it not our goal to help our students build a relationship with the work where at the same time they appreciate its structure and its essence, that we help elucidate, but yet find personal meaning, build personal relationships? And I want to emphasize this shifting of stances. And this is how I train my students in our research. We want to move from inside to outside. One of my favorite forms of music is Indian classical music. And I watched Zakir Hussain, another great instrumentalist, perform. They are both in the work and at the same time have this beatific look. They are above the work. Or in Middle Eastern music, where great passion and engagement brings great expression on the face, both inside and outside. Is this not our role as teachers? To help students before us, to help our friends and colleagues before us, move into the text, move into the cultural work, to feel it overwhelm us, to feel it take us over, to build a relationship to the work, and yet to be able to stand back and take a look at ourselves as readers, as listeners, as people in relationship to the work. So what is aesthetic experience? What is the reading experience? On the outside, it's a person sitting across us in a train looking at a book. But on the inside, we move in and we move out. And here's where I want to turn to reading during the pandemic. In reading during the pandemic, we read in a special situation. There is literature. Siegfried Schmidt wrote about the transition in Germany in the 1700s, when books became available and print was larger, between having someone read to us in the same way that we tell our children bedtime stories. Adults in the community would have someone read. They themselves were not literate. So the person would read to them and look at how things changed, to the pocketbook, to the iPad, to the portable device. And so here is the theme of alone and in groups that is so salient for us during the pandemic. The meaning of reading in the pandemic, I go back to my original theme of opportunities and constraints. We are constrained. I've been to the university twice in 6 months. But there is opportunity, such as today, for me to speak with new friends, for me to welcome you into my world, to me to share with you as we all share with each other. And so reading that initially was in groups and then became private as portable devices became more readily available or print could be purchased for cheap cost. This is therefore the reading in private is not new. The reading in social isolation is not new. And so I come to the final theme. In the act of reading, during the time of the pandemic, we have a unique opportunity, an opportunity to find the essence of the text because we are alone, because we read for distraction, because we are trapped in our homes, but yet we share the opportunity with others and the opportunity to talk with children about our works, to talk with friends about our work, to share on Zoom understandings of our work. So the pandemic has given us an opportunity. The opportunity the pandemic has given us is to rediscover the meaning of inside and outside, not just instrumentally in our lives, because the rules say to be safe and to live, we must be careful and inward in our homes. But this theme of outside and inside, of the realities of the pandemic, is a metaphor for outside and inside with our engagement with the text, alone or with others. And I come to my final point, and then I will review my overall ideas. They tell me at the university I can no longer lecture for an hour. I must give my students clusters of slides in groups of 8 to 10 so I don't bore them and overwhelm them. So I will come to my major point here at the end, and I will invite questions after I summarize my ideas. The final point is this: culture, literary experience, aesthetic experience in the face of the pandemic provides not just a constraint for being outside and living with fear, but to explore the themes of fear in literature, to explore the themes of resilience in literature, and to realize that we as individuals, or collectively as society, or friends with people around the world, have an opportunity to find ourselves, to be inside and outside, to enter the text and yet stand back and see ourselves as readers under circumstances of constraint, under circumstances of danger. And so finally, in picking the themes of the reading, in picking the themes that we choose to share with our students in teaching and learning contexts, I can only suggest the importance of choosing material that provide opportunities for reflection. And here's the final piece. Look at us. We are from around the world. You have never heard of me. But yet we find ourselves with new friends. We find ourselves through Zoom breaking the boundaries of culture, breaking the boundaries of isolation. And so we see that literature is the international unifier. And I cannot underscore enough the importance of seeing ourselves as individuals and as consumers of culture, and yet as teachers, and yet as people sharing around the world. A search for meaning in the face of threat. And so, indeed, in searching through literature, we find our souls and ourselves. So let me summarize the voyage I've taken you on today, and I invite you to go on YouTube and find the lectures and lines that are tied to my book, and my interviews with artists who reveal who they are, or my recent TEDx lecture on the dangers of the social media platforms. The medium is the matrix. We are all together. And if you write me an email, the Gerald Kopchik, C-U-P-C-H-I-K, not C-K, it's not Kopchikin, at utoronto.ca, I will shock you with the speed of my response, because yet we are together. And it is my role as a teacher, as it is for each of us in our cultures, to break down the boundaries of separation, to understand that I can read literature in any of your cultures and understand the meaning of life. In our recent work on identity, The people who could take parts of their worlds, come into the left, and put them together in stories were people who were elevated, people concerned for growth. So let me summarize. I began as a student concerned with health, with controlling dangers and controlling fears. I continued as a researcher and a postdoc in psychology in my concern for the nature of aesthetics, moving far away and moving in close. And as someone very interested in theory and in history, I see that in the Western culture, you have these two teams concerned for the essence of the work or concerned for the personal relationship with the work. It is true for us all. So in sum, in the face of the constraints of the pandemic that have forced us to be in our homes and isolated and separated from our students, indeed, we have the opportunity because I lecture to your faces. I do not lecture in isolation, and it is true for us all together. In sum, as teachers, as parents, as citizens of our country and citizens of the world, we indeed are all together. This pandemic has brought us together. Therefore, in sum, we want to avoid doctrinal boundaries. We want to traverse international separations. And I cannot recommend to you enough, and I'm happy to provide advice on these matters, for each of you in your own countries to initiate a study of reading patterns. How has reading changed? And how does reading help sustain us and build resilience? If you need advice on this, write to me, gerald.kopchek@utoronto.ca, and I will provide all manner of advice needed to accomplish this. Thank you for your great patience in listening to me across this time and gulf. We will build together a future, survive together, encourage our students to find themselves in the midst of national tragedies. Thank you very much for listening. I'm happy to answer whatever questions.
Thank you so much, sir. Pandemic has given us an opportunity to rediscover ourselves and to find ourselves from inside, as well as he has talked about a number of things that we actually think about pandemic. Thank you so much, Professor Kopchek, sir, for your enlightening keynote speech. Now I request the president of the inaugural function and this session, our beloved principal, Dr. Kundlik H. Shinde, sir, to have presidential remarks. Over to you, sir.
Yeah. Good evening, one and all.
Good evening.
Speakers, Professor Gerald Kapchik, Professor, University of Toronto, Canada, and Dr. Ashok Boite, ex-Vice Pro VC, Shivaji University, all the speakers, delegates, and teachers participants. I, Dr. K. Shinde, the principal, welcome on behalf of the Karmavir Bhaurao Patil College, which is one of the best college in India, autonomous status. I also congratulate the Department of English for organizing international webinar on the occasion and subject language, literature, culture, and pandemic. As we know that pandemic situation is affecting the lives of many students, families, and communities. Similarly, the COVID-19 pandemic has affected educational system worldwide, leading to the near total closures of schools, universities, and colleges. Most governments around the world have temporarily closed educational institutions in an attempt to reduce the spread of COVID-19. So, the process of teaching learning is severely affected by the lockdown and social distancing norms. The sudden shift to online without any planning, especially in countries like India, where the backbone for the online learning was not ready and the curriculum was not designed for such as format. We are now beginning to realize that online learning could be dull as if is creating a new set of tests you learn. This requires all teachers to become more techno-savvy. But any change that so disruptive is also likely to bring with it some new opportunities that will transform the higher education system worldwide and especially in country like India, which is planning to bring about a planned reform in this sector. It provides an opportunity for universities and colleges to start improving the quality of the learning material that is used in the teaching and learning process. As we are confined within four walls, our homes under lockdown in the wake of COVID-19, the language and literature helps to break the barriers connecting us across different historical periods and time zones with others who have experienced similar tragedies. More important, literature shows us that we have a lot of common with others who are from distant lands and different times, encouraging us to appreciate the fact that we are not only ones who are dealing with the worldwide deviation wrought by the pandemic. During the period, a large number of academic meetings, seminars, conferences will move online, and there is a possibility that some new form of an online conferencing platform will be emerge as a new model. I am quite hopeful that such webinars will bring out new ideas in regard to the education. Thanking you so much.
Thank you, sir, for your kind words and your concern regarding the online teaching learning process and its proper implementation in countries like our own country. I thank you once again, Professor Gerald Kopchik, sir.
Mani sir, he invites some questions.
Yes, I'm doing that. If there are some questions, I request the participants on Zoom as well as the participants who are watching the live streaming on YouTube to place questions in the chat box and comment box so that we can take some of the questions for discussion. Till then, yes, sir. Sir, please unmute your voice and yeah.
I would like to thank Professor Kopchek for your thought-provoking speech. I enjoy it so much that I think your speech needs to be spread to universities around the world, especially when you talk about the importance of deep thought for our education. The current problem for education is we only, of course, not we, but quite a few professors and teachers only address the shallow contents of the topic. And today, I would also address this issue. So later, I will follow your step to talk about the importance of deep education. Thank you so much for your thought-provoking beginning for this seminar. Thank you.
Can I say something about deep education?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I teach students from around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And they come to Canada with their families from South Asia, from Africa, from different places. And the families have a challenge to get a piece of the action, to establish themselves. And they see their children as the generation of opportunity. So I want to say something about deep education. I'll be brief. We all of us here, all the professors here, face the same challenge at the university: publish or perish. We have to be good boys and good girls, and good they in this circumstance, to get the papers out, to establish our credibility. And the pressures are such that people can live on the surface of research. They don't necessarily see themselves as researchers. So I think the deep reading, being a deep member of society, being a deep professor, requires in the same moment an awareness of ourselves in our lives, an awareness of myself as a reader, an awareness of myself as a teacher, and that it is important for us to convey to our students, to help raise them up, to help them raise themselves up, to be honest in looking at the world around them, the challenges of their families, which can be more conservative than the environment they're in, the university, which can demand speed of production rather than depth of thought. And I turn to my 94-year-old mentor, Kurt Danziger, the most senior historian of psychology in the world. I'm blessed to have him as my teacher, to say that in the end, in order to go for the deep reading cannot be outside of a deeper, an honest understanding of ourselves in a society. An honest understanding of the realities that governments face, that administrators face, that professors face, and that students themselves face. So deep reading begins at home. Deep reading begins with humility. Deep reading shows respect for the text. Deep reading shows respect for the interpretations of others, not just in our culture, but visitors to our culture. So deep reading is ultimately fundamental. Deep reading is the basis for personal growth.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. If there are some more questions, we can wait. One question, sir, which is in the YouTube comment box.
Go ahead.
That whether we can compare the present situation, present pandemic situation to the Black Death, and how can we associate it with literature?
First of all, I wasn't there at the Black Death, and I didn't have to survive that. But it is an interesting issue. I mean, ask yourselves the question. When you went to the university a year ago to teach, could you have imagined the circumstances we are in? So we refer to this pandemic event as a black swan, a unique event I'm a professor since 1972. I'm getting older. I'm in denial of it. We never imagined it. None of us imagined it, but it's real. But as citizens, and this is something that I cannot underscore enough, civil society, and in the act of reading literature, and the meaning of reading literature continues to our responsibility as citizens and teachers. So rather than a Black Death, let us speak of from the Black Death, we have the resurrection, we have an awakening. Not that we have moments in bliss, but I don't know how many of you are conducting research or one-on-one interviews with students, but the intimacy that we can have. I tell my students in a class of 20, you don't have to turn on your cameras. That's the university rule. But I need at least a few faces because I need to be able to speak to you. And so the few faces that I see here, I cannot thank you enough for being there because I speak to each person on the screen. So when we say the Black Death, let's say in the face of the black swan, we have the unexpected circumstance. And in the midst of the unexpected circumstance, we all have to adjust. I know at my university, in March, when the professors had to close their classrooms and switch over to online teaching, we have all shared the hysteria. Without the people who support me, heaven help me, I would be doomed. But yet, as I become comfortable with the technology, and as my students, and I must understand the pressures that the students face, it requires empathy on our part in this black swan. It requires empathy on our part to understand the pressures that our students face, because they're not just taking Jerry Kopchek's course. They have many burdens. They have many family responsibilities. My younger colleagues with young children at home, it is harder for them to produce. The university has given people 1 or 2 more years of work to get tenure. So in summary, on this theme of opportunities and constraints, we are indeed constrained by the pandemic. But yet there is an opportunity for us to find ourselves as teachers and to help our students find themselves as members of civil society. In the midst of this horror that none of us could have predicted, I'm a professor for almost 50 years, I never imagined it. In the midst of it, we struggle. In the midst of it, we have literature as an opportunity for reading about tragedy and the realities of others. And in the act of reading, Wolfgang Isser's book, one of my favorites, in the act of reading, we find ourselves as students, and we find ourselves as teachers. In other words, I bring a positive spin as much as I can to uplift the situation and restrict the fears that we have. Danger control and fear control at the same time. A positive view.
Yes,
No
sir.
choice. No choice.
Thank you, sir.
Mani sir. Yeah. May I ask one question?
Yes,
I'm
sir.
here.
Yeah. Thank you, sir, for your very thought-provoking interaction with all of the participants. But I have a couple of queries regarding what you said. Particularly, I'm very much impressed by the way with which you told us that how you are moving, how it is essential for us during this pandemic period to reread the things, to read the text, because this is the time which we are getting, which it was not possible 6 months back. Before March, it was everything was open. Everything was open, and it was not possible for us to get enough time to ponder upon the things, reflect upon our own inner self. So I started as a teacher for last more than 25 years. I started going online, taking the classes of my students. But at the same time, what I realized is that when I was taking my classes offline, that was a time when I used to interact a lot with my students. It was possible for them to open up their minds, their hearts, what is happening in them. While say for example, I am teaching some of the plays by Shakespeare, it was possible for my students to open up their minds, come up with their own ideas. But now, because of this pandemic kind of thing, it has become very much difficult for us. Every day we are getting the numbers. For example, in India itself, now the number of the deaths has moved more than 100,000 now. Now, when these things are happening all around us, when we are reading, listening to the news which are coming from the about the horrible effects of pandemic on human life, when they are happening, they were happening in Wuhan towards the end, towards the turn of the 2019, but slowly and gradually it took over the entire world. In my country, for example, in India, I belong to Mumbai, for example. So now Mumbai, every day the numbers are moving more than 2,000 per day. But I was much disturbed. But say, still I could manage. I could focus upon my teaching. I could focus upon reflecting on how to find out my own inner self, how to explore what is happening. But that fear, it engrossed me. It engulfed me. 2 days back, I lost my father-in-law, who was around 70 years old. And yesterday, only 7 more members of my own family, they have been detected positive with this COVID-19. In my own family, my kids, my wife, myself, we are waiting for our reports to come today evening. Late evening, we are expecting the report. I don't know if we are going to declare COVID-19 positive or negative. So such kind of fear, it actually has affected a lot. This is my personal experience. So now, as a psychologist, how is this possible for us to find out a way, or to find out some means to move away from this kind of fear which has come because of this particular unseen, unknown enemy, like this particular COVID-19. So can you, for the people like us, and I'm not the only person, we do have for last more than 2 months, I have lost more than a dozen of my very close friends from the teaching fraternity itself, from the English fraternity itself, because of COVID-19 in India. So how can you show, as a psychologist, any means, any way to move out of this kind of fear? Is there any way out and move away from this fear to find out our own self in a better manner? Can you please reflect on this?
And so I began my talk by saying I studied as a graduate student as danger control and fear control. And you're putting another emotion on the table. It's not just fear, it's sadness of loss. Now, as I listen to you and think of how many people this is being shared with, your concerns and feelings are being shared with all the colleagues from around the world, who then say to themselves, oh my God, I'm not alone. He's frightened too. He has suffered loss as well. So what you're putting on the table is very real, brings several themes to bear. Aristotle's comments on tragedy. The tragedy provides an opportunity for catharsis. In your case, the sharing of the sentiments, the sharing of the loss. And those of us where we're all muted, but we're not muted inside, because we feel the sadness. So Aristotle said to us, when we observe tragedy, this is a living tragedy. You are speaking of a living tragedy, not something on a stage, not something where we're members of an audience. We are the audience, but we're also on the stage. But in your act of sharing, you elevate us. Because we feel the loss. Because we have all suffered loss, not just here, but in war, in different circumstances. We all understand loss. So we go back to Aristotle in theater, and we say there's an opportunity for catharsis, so we can share this. I'm overcome, as many of you. But yet, what does he also say to us? The importance of theater, the importance of literature, is the universal elevating of consciousness. In the act of listening to you, in the act of understanding that we are not alone, that you are not alone, that I'm sure many of us who are participating here, even on YouTube, even in the detachment of Zoom, send condolences to you. As you inside send condolences to all of those among us who have suffered loss. So in the act of reflecting on literature, we can cleanse ourselves because this is real. This is not pretend. This is the theater of real life. But yet through Zoom, through sharing of this event, we say to you that you are not alone. It is understood by all of us. The feelings are shared by all of us. So it gives us a renewed mission in talking to our students about literature in our lives, because we have an opportunity to help elevate others. In what sense? Help elevate others because we are all participants in the theater of life. because we all have an opportunity to listen to your sad circumstance and understand sad circumstance in general. Your story elevates us in the act of empathy, in the act of resonance. And so the point I made earlier comes again in Professor's life, that in the act of reflecting on our lives, we spill beyond the narrow boundaries of literature into the realities of circumstance, so that each person's life is a story. So each person's life merits listening to, so that we are encouraged to be more empathic to our students. So we are more encouraged to be empathic to our countrymen and women and all followers and leaders, that we are in this together. In a sense, collective reading, individual reading, and collective resilience are themes that emerge from this webinar. That we come to this, I was actually an hour earlier than I thought. I rushed to get ready in the last minutes. We all have our circumstances. In reading literature, we find ourselves. In listening to the stories of other people's lives, we find ourselves. We are not an island. We are not alone. You are not alone. So we share the tragedy. This is the tragedy of reality. It's not Shakespeare on the stage. It is around us every minute. And so the value of a webinar like this, the value of teaching, the value of the dignity of our profession that we are blessed with, is the opportunity to go deep within ourselves, to admit the pain, to accept the pain, not just in ourselves, but in others. And in the act of accepting the pain, we elevate ourselves as a people, because in the face of pain, we reach out to others as gestures of kindness, as gestures of understanding. We encourage our civil society. Pain becomes the vehicle for an awakening, not just of each of us in our countries, but all of us who are participating here collectively today. You are not alone. That's how I see it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sir, a question from me.
My dear friend Ashok.
Yes. Hello, good morning to Dr. Gerald Kapchik and good evening from here. I hope you are very fine. I appreciate...
I miss my friends in India.
Yes.
And the wonderful food.
Yeah. Nice to see here on this platform together. I appreciate your lecture, sir. It was very thought-provoking, very, widening our horizons and giving us, insight in the sense that you talked about Aristotle's tragedy and catharsis. And at the same time, you talked about resurrection, Eliot's resurrection, and how to cope with this pandemic and how to share our feelings. But on the contrary, there have been examples where our own kith and kin have been abandoning instead of sharing in these moments of sorrow and in these tragic moments, they have been shunning, they have been escaping, running away. And there were many, even a close friend of Yashpal and my common friend, a professor, we lost him in the month of May and we felt very sorry. But due to this pandemic, it brought about more isolation, more alienation, and at the same time, now the things are recovering, improving. I think what you have suggested is the proper course of action that we need to, and literature and emotions and feelings are going to help us recover and come out of this pandemic disaster so soon. So your lecture is highly appreciable. But my question is, how Canada is responding and the literature responding to the pandemic, and what exactly any literature produced during this? And there is already, I came to know in certain segments, there is an alienation, physical isolation is also there. So how has it aggravated or is that softened, or what is reaction to Canada to this pandemic, sir?
First of all, the border to the United States is closed.
Okay.
Number one.
Okay.
But CNN is open.
Okay.
So every day we look across the fence, and every day we are thankful we are here, not there, because we have an opportunity, because we have an echo. The point is this: in the context of the tragedy of the pandemic, in the newspapers, people are engaging in a quiet resurrection of the self. And I find it with my students. And I can say as a teacher, I don't know, but the people who are writing, people run away to private domains. I think it's very, very important, Ashok, not to hide, but to face the realities of the feelings that we have. And I want to add that in Canada, friends who passed away before they closed the hospitals were very fortunate. They did not die alone. And the friends I have whose parents and others have passed away alone in the hospital have suffered that extra burden of the Zoom funeral, a paradox beyond paradox, the Zoom mourning, a paradox beyond paradox, in and of itself, a byproduct tragedy of the circumstance. So it's not just the loss, but the lack of an opportunity to properly mourn. So a focus of all of my work now with my students is the emphasis on not escaping, because we can never escape sadness in the end. We're proposing some research now on dreams of the pandemic. Do they come into your dreams, and what do you feel? Because we can never run away. So I recommend to all of us as teachers, all of us as teachers of literature, to become teachers of writing, not merely the confessional, but teachers of writing. We cannot encourage our students enough to tell stories and make up stories in which their lives infuse, enrich, and deepen the story. So again, constraints, we're trapped at home. Constraints, we suffer sad loss. But opportunity thrust upon us. Sometimes we search for opportunity. Sometimes we are forced upon opportunity. And this is a chance, I cannot encourage it enough, to colleagues and friends around the world to open their hearts and redefine their teaching a little bit of literature to encourage the writing of personal literatures, writing of personal confessions that are shared among the students. It is the sharing that is the cleansing of the soul. It is the removing of the isolation. It is the realization that we are not alone. I did not know what to expect as I prepared my lecture. I sat like a good boy and said, okay, Jerry, what are you going to say to these people? But now, more important than my lecture is the sharing together that we've had here of collective circumstance around the world, of collective realities that we face, and of collective opportunity as teachers to help lift our students with from the sense of isolation, from the loss of family, because in the act of sharing, we find ourselves. In the act of sharing, we calm ourselves. It cannot be emphasized enough. We must combat isolation through sharing and literature, and finding in the story and discussing the stories that we write, that our students write, meanings in life. That's my sense.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your lively response and insightful thoughts.
Thank you for encouraging them. Professors do not exist in isolation. Professors are nurtured by their friends, their colleagues, and their students. The idea of the isolated professor in the attic writing quietly moments of genius does not capture the world today of social platforms. We need each other. We all need each other around the world to find legitimacy in our own lives. And to the extent that each of you nurture me, we nurture ourselves together as a collective organism of teaching and elevation of our students. Kopchek's final words.
Yes. If there are any more questions, they're most welcome. I think.
Or send me an email. Send me an email. I'll respond quickly, I promise.
Yeah, Mani sir. Mani sir, let us move ahead now, please.
Yes, yes. So thank you so much, sir.
My pleasure.
I also thank our principal for presiding over the inaugural function. Now let's move on to the first plenary session. The speaker for the first plenary session is Professor Chung from President APA Mall, Taiwan. I also request Professor Stephen Olander to chair this plenary session. Let me start with the introduction of the speaker of this plenary session, Professor Chung. He has held a number of positions like International President of Deep University. He also is a senior advisor, Lions Clubs of International Foundation, President of Asia Pacific Association of Multimedia Assisted Language, International Director of NETPAW, GETPAW initiated and funded. Then he has also received his doctoral degree in computational linguistics from University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And apart from this, he has experience of working as professor, distinguished professor, and visiting professor at a number of universities all over the world, including University of Michigan, University of North Carolina, University of Wisconsin. Apart from that, he is founder president of Rosmelia, Taiwan. Now let me introduce the chairperson for this session, Dr. Stephen Olander, who is a professor from the Department of English, National Kaohsiung Normal University, Taiwan, and professor at International Lions University. Dr. Olander is secretary for Rosmela and is a member of founding committee of APA Mall. He has carried out his doctoral research in comparative literature at University of Michigan. He has been invited to speak at various conferences in Taiwan, China, Korea on literature and English language instructions. Dr. Olander has published books and articles on literature, drama and film, psychology and English language teaching. He also writes and he has published plays, poetry and fiction. So for this plenary session, I request Professor Chung to guide us. The topic on which he is going to speak is the Global Language Project for Internationalization and Deep Education to promote world peace, prosperity, and bliss. Over to you, Professor Chung.
Yes, good evening to my friends in Taiwan and India, and also good morning to my dear Professor Kopchek. And I'm happy that we can get together to talk about how we can make use of the internet to conquer the fear of the pandemic for language and literature education, especially in terms of deep education. So today I would like to address this topic, and I think it will be good for me to share my PowerPoint with you so that it is easier for me to make my presentation easier for you to understand. So could you make my screen sharing
Yes.
enabled?
Yes, sir. I have enabled the screen sharing. You can start sharing now.
Okay, great. So can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Very good.
Yeah.
So my topic is the globalization and deep education to promote world peace, prosperity, and breeze. And this is a global language project, and I would tell you about it in detail. Before the pandemic, the world looks like this, more peaceful. And this is the situation now, some kind of a mess. The pandemic led to the conflict among countries, especially between China and USA. Of course, the conflict between China and USA further led to some trouble between China and Taiwan. We speak the same language, Chinese. We travel to and from each other, and now everybody almost stay at home. And we saw a lot of airplanes, not the airplanes for passengers, but airplanes for fighting from China. That's a big threat. And I think that's not good for us, not good for anybody. So I think we need to try to think about how we can make use of the Global Language Project for internationalization and deep education to promote world peace, prosperity, and breeze. I would like to go through my introduction myself, since the principal, my dear principal, already introduced me to all our colleagues here, so I'll go through fast. And something is good to have some pictures. I graduated from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. I didn't expect that this university has an airport. It does have an airport, and it has the only supercomputer in the United States in a university. The other one at the time was in the Ministry of Defense of the United States. And I serve as a professor. I still serve as a professor now. Some 10 years ago, I became a lion, and I work hard for charity, and I visited the headquarters in India, in Illinois, United States, and I was invited to serve as a senior advisor for Lions Clubs International Foundation, one of the two institutes at the headquarters. So this is the headquarters. I've been there very many times. And this lion was given to the headquarters by Lions of Taiwan. And I'm happy to tell you that Lions in Taiwan has been making the most donation to LCIF for world charity for the past 6 years. And this is good to see. You can see me in the center. And this is the international president of Lions Club International in 2017. And Dr. Jong Trey from Korea, he served as vice president of Lions Club International at that time. He would like to promote deep education through international lines university. At the time, I served as the international president of Deep University in the States, founded with the research results of the University of Wisconsin-Madison, using the research funding from the Ministry of Education. And I'm founder of International Line University. We have also the founder of International President. Dr. Yonglo Che is the current International President of Lions Club International, and our education goal is to educate our students to become optimistic, altruistic, and knowledgeable world citizens. So you can see this lady beside me. She is from India. He has made the most donation to LCIF. So I'm very happy that I serve as the chairperson for her undergraduate degree at the University of Wisconsin at Madison. And this is the oak tree. So this is a huge oak tree, and OAK here, right? OAK. So we use the oak tree as the tree for Deep University and also for International Lines University. So I serve also as a director of NAPO English Online Test initiative founded by the Ministry of Education in Taiwan. So I hope that India can also use the scores for admission to your university so that we can send more students from Taiwan to your universities. So quite a few students from Taiwan, other countries, taking NAPO test. Also from Hong Kong. And I serve as a professor in several universities. So this is the first university in Taiwan. And then I serve as dean. And this is a good university that enjoys 16,000 students. And I serve as a distinguished professor here. And my research includes researches in Taiwan and in the States. So now that focus on this, the Global Language Project for Internationalization and Deep Education to promote world peace, prosperity, and bridge. So we have two issues here: internationalization and deep education. In Taiwan, we enjoy good economy. However, we still have students who do not have a good economy, and they may not be able to be well educated because of their poverty in their families, or they live in some remote areas that it's hard for them to get a better education as a student in cities. Taiwan is a developed country, and we still have students who need more education to make them enjoy more English education so that they can reach the other side of the world more easily. And There's another issue that's deep education, as I mentioned previously. Quite a lot of teachers and professors enjoy only the shallow instruction without thinking about deep education. So I will address this issue as well. So let's talk about these two issues. In Taiwan, I think this can be the same in other countries. So they would like to teach their students some English. So they may ask the students, what's this? It's good to use some picture. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Of course, if we can give each student an apple, that would be a good beginning for the English course. And usually the answer should be this is an apple. So this is a correct answer. However, this is the first step. The discipline in English, we need something deeper. And of course, in Taiwan and in China, in Hong Kong, and some parts of Asia, of course, I think also in Canada and in the States and in India, some people in these countries can read Chinese. So it's good to have another language. So if we can start with the English language, and then we can have Chinese, we can have language just from India, Spain, Germany, and other countries, so that we can enjoy more internationalization. I was invited to attend an international conference in Iran. I asked my colleague in Iran to teach me 3 sentences in their language. So the first sentence is, my name is Michael in their language. The second sentence is, I come from Taiwan. And when I started the first sentence, they woke up and looked very happy because I used their language. And when I used the second sentence in their language, they were so happy. I became their good friend. And when I used the third sentence, that is, I am happy here. So I became their hero. So you see the power of language and the beauty of using the language of our friends. So next time when I visited India, I would like Professor Saga to teach me these 3 languages in your language. And I'm sure our friends in India would be very happy. And so you see here, for students who are interested in learning Spanish, so I would like to invite professors or lions in Spain or Mexico to record sentences or dialogues or stories using the same sense, dialogue or stories in English, so they can help translate the good textbooks in 2 different languages such as Spanish. So something like this, esto es una manzana. And the text, the stories, and also the speeches will be uploaded to the internet, and everybody can download it or listen online. So you can see the beauty. In Taiwan, citizens speak not only Chinese, but also Taiwanese, Pakistanese, and quite a few native languages, like the case in India. So it's good for us to make use of this project so that these dying languages will be alive for our generations to come. So this project is important, not just for internationalization, but also for keeping dying languages alive. And then the second issue is how we can make language instruction deeper. So we would also make use of different disciplines. So here we will have something like this. This apple tastes delicious. You see here, we use the test for instruction. So as I said previously, it's good to give a piece of apple to our students for the first lesson. And then this apple came from India. You see, we are using the source of the apple in the area of geography, so they would know India can produce apples as well, not just from Canada or the United States or Japan. And this apple cost me $1. See here. So we are using economy issue, not just the language itself. So we can also make use of other disciplines. And then we would like to promote not just internationalization, but also deep education. So see, we would like to address the issue transdisciplinary, not just interdisciplinary. So see here, students or our kids enjoy eating apples without thinking about how they got the apple. So it's good for them to know that their father had worked hard so that they had the money for it, so they can cherish the taste of the apple, and they would think about their fathers working hard to make the money for the apple. I think the deep education is important so that these students, our students, would be more respectful for their parents and also for seniors in public. And it's good for them to know they are poor kids who do not have money for food. They cannot afford any apple. See, so they may eat a bite up the apple and they may throw the apple away without thinking about the situation in which the poor kids do not have any money for food. The apple and they may throw the apple. So I would like to thank you for your attention. So I hope that our colleagues here can join me in the global project so that we can promote not just internationalization and deep education, but also for world peace, prosperity, and breeze. So this is my speech for this seminar, and I would like to thank our principal, Professor Saga, for your invitation, and all colleagues who attend this seminar. And I would like to welcome you to come to Taiwan, and I would give you my best service if you come to Taiwan. So please let me know when you come to Taiwan or when you go to Wisconsin or in Illinois when we meet there. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your knowledgeable and informative session. Now I request Professor Stephen Olander to have his comments on the session. Over to you. Professor Olander, please unmute your audio.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Okay.
Okay. By the way, Dr. Zhuang and I are in the same room. We're looking at each other. Anyway, I wanted to ask a question. Dr. Zhuang says that his idea is to, through education, achieve bliss. But you know, there's an old saying, ignorance is bliss. So how does he reconcile these two contradictory ideas? That's my question.
Can you say that again?
Well, your idea is that we're gonna, through education, we're gonna reach bliss. But there's an old saying that ignorance is bliss.
Okay. I think they are two different situations. The first case that I address is we have poor kids. We need to think about how we can invite more professors or some colleagues who can afford charity. I serve as a distinguished professor. I did enjoy making some good money for myself. And then I was invited by my assistant when I taught at National Kaohsiung Normal University. He became a successful internet businessman. One day he asked me a question: do you want to be a lion? Since he helped a lot by creating a lot of animation stories for my friend without getting any hate, since it needed a lot of money. I like to pay back by became a lion. So I started to become a lion. I travel a lot, spending money for air tickets, learning about how to do charity, and I met quite a lot of successful business people who like to spend their time and money for charity. So I became supervisor of Lions Club Internet Foundation. I help people raise money for charity. I ended in founding in the Nena University so that there will be more lions who would like to stay to become lions without leaving the organization, and there would be more colleagues who would like to become lions so that we can make more poor people become graceful. Of course, by helping them, we will become happier. So this is my lesson from being a lion. And Professor Orlando is a philosopher. Now we have to address the second issue. Of course, it is some philosophy issue. Ignorance is bliss. If we do not think too much about something that is thorny, something like the pandemic, something like the conflict between China and the States, then we can live more happily. In August, I was somewhat astonished since I received a letter from my good friend in the States, Professor Chung, told me that there would be some big conflict between Taiwan and China in October, and in August we didn't see any problem, but in September we met with more threat from China. We didn't know why they send their fighting airplanes to threat Taiwan. We just want to live happily. We just want to make the world more peaceful, prosperous, and blissful. And they send a lot of fighters, airplanes, threatening the peace between China and Taiwan. And it seems that there will be some big conflict. So I hope that we would not only enjoy ignorance for bliss, we would like to be knowledgeable and also wise for making the world more peaceful, prosperous, and blissful by contacting my friends in China and my friends in India and my friends in other countries. Since I serve as a senior advisor, so I know quite a lot of top lions, leaders around the world. I hope that we try to pray to our God that the world will be more peaceful, prosperous, and blissful. And I think human beings need to enjoy this. We do not need any conflicts. I'm sure we human beings are wise, so we just need to make ourselves wiser so that there will be no conflict. We need to work together to conquer the pandemic. We should not allow the pandemic to cause the trouble to the world. So this is my hope, and I hope that we work together to make the world more peaceful, prosperous, and blissful through deep education in language and literature and other disciplines. Thank you.
I have a comment on ignorance, if I may. Bishop Nicholas of Causa in 1410 introduced the doctrine of ignorance. And anyone who jumps into the area of imagination, as I have, has jumped into a very dangerous area because so much scholarship is present. And this is what I learned from the doctrine of ignorance and from my lectures in India in 2019. The doctrine of ignorance holds that we can only really begin to learn when we confront how ignorant we are. Whether it's ignorance regarding how to cope with the pandemic, whether it's ignorance regarding any particular little area of research that we as professors and scholars have jumped into. So ignorance and humility is the first step for knowledge, number one. When I lectured in India, in Indore and Mumbai in 2019 in January, a most wonderful visit, Professor Bhatt, dear friend of Ashok, taught me something very important. A world expert in numismatics and coins and stamps, he talked about how he worked with local villagers, training them how to notice coins and other cultural artifacts on the banks of the rivers where they lived. And the way he spoke and the respect that he felt toward these local community members, lacking in education, but not lacking in vision, lacking in education, but not lacking in culture, has remained with me as a lesson in the importance of confronting our ignorance while at the same time confronting respect or learning respect for people in different communities, perhaps not as educated as we are, who have the wisdom and understanding from whom we can learn. And the final point that I want to make is this. When it comes to dealing or helping or working with children from disadvantaged families, and I have them hidden in my own midst, we go into the classroom, we try to be good boys and good girls and entertain and awaken our students, and yet we know that out there are people who have suffered. And so I believe that in the education of children and the awakening of children, however poor, is the following. We have all survived. We have all struggled. And by recognizing within ourselves, regardless of the financial state of the family, the strengths that we have acquired of resilience in survival, and by telling each of these kids, you may have come from a poor family. You may have come from lower classes. You may be rural, not urban. You may be a whole bunch of things we would consider disadvantaged. But yet within you and within your struggle, you have the kernel, the essence, the hope of future success. So we begin with ignorance. We learn from Professor Bhatt about dealing with local villagers to find coins and other Indian artifacts. And we awaken to the idea that by helping children and others find within themselves the essence of success that are part of their struggles. My father dropped out in grade 3 in Latvia. They were too poor to go to school. It is not a matter of, it is in the end, a matter of awakening within ourselves the kernels of gifts of survival and nurturing others to have the confidence to find it within them. because the children from poorer families are told you are poor and therefore of lesser value. It is our job to elevate the student by helping them find within themselves the blessings and talents they have. Kopchek's advice from beyond.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello.
Yes.
If there are some questions from the participants, they are most welcome.
How is that? Maureen, do you still have any other questions?
No, I think not at this time.
Good.
So, shall we move on to the next session? If there are no questions from the participants, Sargar sir, your audio is mute.
My audio okay?
Listen.
Again?
Let me see.
What happened?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Professor Ole.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
So?
You gotta stop.
Like to start, yeah. I would like to put on the screen my PowerPoint, right?
Okay.
Instead of my face, which is not that interesting.
Okay, I can help. Okay.
This is the magic.
PowerPoint.
Even though they're so far apart, they're in fact together. We're observing a miracle before our eyes, an international miracle.
You need to open your PowerPoint.
Yeah, well,
Your PowerPoint.
it's on the desktop.
Huh?
And it's on the desktop, and it's on my and I sent you a copy, and so here.
Okay. Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yes, sir. Sir, I have
Yes, yes.
enabled the screen sharing from here.
Slideshow. Okay. So you can start.
So, full screen. Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right.
No.
No.
Not yet.
Okay.
Wait. Oh. Okay, fine. Okay.
Yes, sir. Share it.
Now it's better. It's better.
You're a genius.
Okay.
Okay. So you can hear me okay, right?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So I'll begin. This is a look at 4 dramas of the 20th century. And the title is Literature as Biographical Historical Testimony, 4 Dramas, and the HUAC and McCarthy Witch Hunts. So this takes us back to the mid-century, mid-20th century, and beyond, afterward. Arthur Miller's play, The Crucible, as you see in the title, was first performed July 22nd, 1953. It is his most often performed play. In the story, a sober Puritan community of 17th century America seemingly goes mad with a phobia. It appears that some of their fellow members are making pacts with Satan, the devil, and harming, even murdering fellow residents and their children. Miller was generally faithful to history because the background is authentic. It really happened, right? While manipulating certain facts and personalities for dramatic effect. Why did Miller choose this subject at this time? He strongly disapproved of, but would later be called to testify on this date at the House Un-American Activities Committee hearings, and he was very averse to doing so. He didn't want to testify. He didn't believe in what the committee was doing. Didn't think it was right. According to Miller, the committee had overstepped the boundaries imposed by constitutional law to investigate the dangers of communist activities in America. In Act 1 of The Crucible, Miller comments, any man who is not reactionary in his views of communism is open to the charge of alliance with the red hell, that is, with the communists or the Reds. He will testify to the committee that though he had sympathies with communist ideology in his youth, he has since broken with it. Most consequentially, he refuses to name any theater people who are communists. Thus, his choice to dramatize the mania of the Salem witch trials was prompted by his disgust with the ongoing Huick hearings. He wished to highlight that they had embarked on another witch hunt, therefore, innocent victims would suffer. But why did this so-called mania of 1692 take place? What could have gotten into the afflicted children, the accusers of the so-called witches? What could have so possessed the sober, rational Puritans of that time that they could believe that some of their most upright church members were secretly working with the devil to overthrow Christianity? Elaine Pagels, in The Origin of Satan, says, in the early days of Christianity, Paul thought in terms of reconciliation. That is, St. Paul, he was later made a saint. That is, that non-believers, even enemies, could be led to embrace the new faith and be brought to God. More radically, he held that Satan acts as God's agent, not to corrupt people, but to test them, similar to his role in the book of Job, although in that book he's called the adversary, not Satan. Yet in the 4th century, St. Augustine said, Christians often experience the struggle against evil as if they had suffered a demonic attack, that is, from Satan. Pagel says, so compelling is this vision of cosmic war that it has pervaded the imagination of millions of people for 2,000 years. The Salem events had a very personal meaning for Miller because he saw something similar happening in his own time. When the Huick and Senator McCarthy hearings were being held to investigate the activities of communists. Before Miller went to Salem to research the play in 1952, he visited his good friends, Elia and Molly Kazan. Kazan had directed 2 of Miller's plays, and he went on to become a very famous director, probably the most famous of his time. Kazan would also testify before the Huick and admit that he had been a member of the Communist Party, but then broke with it. Unlike Miller, he would go on to divulge or reveal the names of associates in the theater world he knew to be connected with the party. Because secrecy serves the communists, he thought. This act put him at odds with many in the Broadway theater, including Miller, for virtually the rest of his life. They felt that he had betrayed them, his former pals and associates. In his autobiography, he admits being told by studio heads, because he was at this time mostly a filmmaker, a director of films, He would no longer be asked to direct films if he did not cooperate with the Hua Committee. But Kazan insists that he felt it best if everyone was completely open before the committee and activities against American interests be revealed. He knew that whatever he decided to do, he would lose in the end, but he claims he had to be true to his own beliefs. Yeah, if he talked and exposed his friends, he would be called, that would be considered a betrayal. But if he didn't talk, he would lose his job. His career might go up in flames. After his testimony, he even took out a full-page notice in the New York Times in an attempt to explain his decision. That didn't work out very well, though. Later, when Kazan went to Czechoslovakia to direct Man on a Tightrope, those with firsthand experience living under communism told him that he had done the right thing by testifying fully. As for his wife, Molly, she had no objections to his testimony. In her own bitter experience, communists took control of a periodical she was working for and then perverted its mission. G. Edward Griffin, who wrote a book on the United Nations, says anyone who is familiar with communist strategy knows that the communists join organizations either to destroy them or to take them over. And Raymond de Jaeger, a priest, a Catholic priest who lived in China at this time for many years, says the coalition to a communist means an opportunity to infiltrate and invade and eventually to take over completely, creating an iron totalitarianism, total control. Miller's autobiography says, when Kazan explained to me why he had to testify as he would, I grew frightened. I was growing cooler with the thought that I could be up for sacrifice if Kazan knew my background. In other words, Kazan would reveal him as a communist sympathizer in the past and someone who attended communist meetings. But I don't know why Miller would be afraid of that, because the committee knew that anyway. See? Miller tells Kazan that it wasn't the Reds or commies that they had to fret about. It was the other side. In other words, the Huick and McCarthy witch hunters. Miller says to Kazan, however you testify, it will be for the right reasons. By this, he implied that it would not affect their friendship. Yet after Kazan's testimony, they were never close friends again, though many years later, they'd worked together again in the theater. But Kazan writes that after his testimony, he was hurt when Miller snubbed him by not greeting him as he was entering a building while Miller was exiting it. In his own testimony before the Huick, Miller states that he never at any time publicly attacked Kazan for giving full testimony. Even prior to their breakup and Miller's departure to do research in Salem, Molly Kazan did not want him to write the play. Why? Because though there were no real witches in 1692 Salem, there were indeed communists in America. What she did know, however, many were in high positions in government, or at least a good number. Molly's fear was that Miller's play would lead many to conclude that the Huick and McCarthy accusations were unjust. Thus, we need not fear the communists, Americans would conclude. But Miller in his play's Act 1 comments that some of the citizens of Salem were witches. That is, they acted like and believed they were. I have no doubt that people were communing with and even worshiping the devil in Salem, he writes. Miller's implication, there were witches in Salem and there are communists here in America now, but they aren't a great danger. Yet was this cavalier or casual and naive attitude correct? I don't think so. At Salem, very few confessed to being witches, which would have been wise if they could thereby escape hanging. In other words, if they had been witches, if they had not been witches, all they had to do if they were accused was say they had been witches, but now they were sorry. They would have been forgiven and allowed to go home, at least eventually. And those of the 20 who did confess later recanted and went on to be executed. Whether they had been guilty or not, why would they recant, knowing it meant their death? Well, the answer has to be they bravely refused to live a lie. Second, even if some practiced witchcraft, they were few, whereas communists had infiltrated high levels of the US government, some of whom had access to sensitive information. Thus, despite the overreachings of the Hooks, some of their investigations were worthy. Senator McCarthy, however, went after communist agents and dupes and so-called fellow travelers, that is, communist sympathizers, in key positions of federal government, some being in a position to make laws and decide foreign policy. Neither Miller nor Kazan appeared before his committee simply because they were not filling government positions, so they never testified in the McCarthy hearings. It is questionable to what degree the Hooks had the right to dig into Americans' private lives. This is still very controversial. For example, those of Miller, Kazan, and their colleagues, communist-oriented or not. But it is easy because America is supposed to be a free country. If you want to be a communist, you can be a communist. You're just not supposed to advocate overthrow of the government, or especially violent overthrow of the government. But it is easy to argue that the McCarthy Committee had every right, even an obligation, to investigate whether communists were in the federal government, for they could and did work against American interests. The Verona Project confirms that McCarthy's suspicions were on track. It was a counterintelligence program run by the US Army for 37 years. You see the dates. Purpose: the decryption of intercepted Soviet messages, around 3,000 messages decrypted in all. Yes, the Soviets had actually relaxed their security enough to allow this to take place for a while. As McCarthy claimed, the files showed that high-ranking US government officials passed sensitive information to the Soviet Union. This had seriously damaged American interests. Well, this is what we call treason. In fact, Soviet espionage or spying against US from 1942 to 1945, when they were World War II allies, was of the type that a nation directs at an enemy state, and yet they were allies. Conclusion: Stalin had already launched a covert attack on the United States before the war ended. Regarding those suspected and questioned by McCarthy, the Verona files show that his suspicions were correct. In his book on McCarthy, called Blacklisted by History, M. Stanton Evans writes, rather than blameless martyrs, as Americans were led to believe, all were indeed communists, Soviet agents, or assets of the KGB, that is the Soviet Union's CIA, just as McCarthy had suggested. So whose testimony was right? Kazan's full or Miller's partly withheld statements. Kazan went on to defy those who accused him of betrayal for naming names, via one of the best films he ever directed, On the Waterfront. It won 8 Oscars: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay, etc. In this story, screenplay by Bud Schulberg, who also fully cooperated with the Hooks, the mafia or mob has taken control of the Brooklyn docks. Mob-connected union boss Johnny Friendly, nice name, huh? Friendly, is behind several murders, but few are willing to inform on him. Informing also carries the stigma of shame for being a stoolie or rat. Stool pigeon is the full name of stoolie. Pushed by a priest and by Edie, who later becomes his girlfriend, Terry's girlfriend, whose brother had been murdered by Friendly, the hero, Terry Malloy, played by Marlon Brando, agrees to testify after the murder of his brother. So Edie's brother is murdered and Terry's own brother is murdered. After his testimony, however, Terry is shunned by his coworkers, but they finally support him after they witness Terry's heroic defiance of Friendly. The connection between the hero's testimony and those of Kazan and Schulberg is clear. At the end, Terry is shown to have done the right thing, by testifying and naming names, just as Kazan did and Schulberg did, they want to believe, right? The dock workers all back him and reject mob control. This is literature or art reflecting, and in this case, idealizing biographical historical reality. Indeed, Kazan was not so fortunate. In 1999, he appeared on stage to receive an honorary Oscar at age 89. He received a standing ovation, but still some in the audience refused to stand or applaud. There was even a small protest outside by those who refused to forget and forgive. This was 47 years after his Hewitt testimony. Bitter memories die hard. Interestingly, the two dramas have one thing in common. Both focus on testimony as crucial for ridding a community of the disease from which it suffers. In the Crucible, the accused are portrayed as innocent or harmless. But on the waterfront, the docks have been corrupted by mob influence. So while we do not want to see the unjustly accused of Salem punished, we do want to see the justly accused mob punished and cleared from the docks. These points of view reflect how Miller and Kazan wished their testimonies viewed, their testimonies before the HUAC. Each implies they obeyed their conscience in giving testimony, whether incompletely or fully, unwillingly or willingly. Miller goes on to write another play that reflects the same viewpoint as you see above, a view from the bridge. That is, it is a terrible thing to rat or squeal on the innocent, even when strictly speaking, they have broken the law. This drama is also set at or around a Brooklyn dockyard. Brooklyn, of course, is a part of New York, right? Near the end, the protagonist, Eddie, gives testimony to the authorities that he is harboring two illegal aliens who, of course, will need to be deported or sent back to their home country of Italy. The problem is he squeals out of jealousy. Eddie at first agreed to house the immigrants, his wife's cousins, but when Rodolfo, one of them, starts dating his adopted niece, Eddie, who is sexually fixated on her, tells the authorities of the two illegals' presence. At the end, Marco, the other illegal, confronts Eddie for ratting on them. But Eddie denies it and turns on him with a knife. Marco stabs Eddie fatally in the scuffle. Ironically, Rodolfo will be able to stay in America once he marries Eddie's niece, so Eddie completely fails in his goal of keeping them apart. Again, as in the Crucible, the testimony here is tainted, not because it is false, it is true, but because it is given for ill motives to eliminate a newly arrived competitor for Catherine's feelings. So again, Miller seems to be justifying his decision not to name names before the Hewitt. True, he never attacked Kazan for divulging the names of his communist cohorts in the theater. In fact, the two later collaborated again in the theater, though this was hard for some in the performing arts field to accept. In their Lincoln Theater collaboration in 1964, Miller's After the Fall, the protagonist, Quentin, a New York Jewish intellectual, is a thin disguise for Miller himself. He reflects back on his life through the entire play, including his marriage to Maggie, recalling Miller's own marriage to famous Marilyn Monroe, the sex symbol of her day and the famous movie star, of course. And both women, fictional and non-fictional, commit suicide. More striking, Quentin, a former communist, breaks with a friend who is about to inform before a congressional committee. But how could Kazan consent to directing a play that seems to be criticizing him or testifying? Well, he did. He did consent. In any case, these two men of the theater seem to have reconciled their differences, even if it was only a question of agreeing to disagree. And that brings us to our conclusion. It is tempting to conclude Kazan, by naming names, did more for his country than did Miller, though Miller surely did more for his associates in the theater world by keeping their secrets. This is the This is the problem, you see. How can you be true to both your country and your associates? Doesn't seem to be possible. But in fact, it's hardly possible to say who was right. Miller may have protected the guilty, while Kazan sometimes exposed the innocent. Likewise, how are we to judge the judges at the Salem witch trials, given the incredible histrionics or theatrics and amazing, hard to explain physical contortions of the accused, because they were so possessed? It seems they really, even if originally they made up what they said about the devil, they went on to believe, many of them, that they really were possessed by the devil. Or because of these witches, right? Because of these women who they accused of being witches. In this regard, I do not see any difference between the East and the West. Witness today's pandemic. Dangerous manias are possible in any human environment, especially one of fear. In China, under Mao Zedong, there was the Cultural Revolution when, as at Salem, children informed on parents and neighbors turned against neighbors. Nobody knew who to trust. Consequently, they trusted the entity that deserved it least, their government. Result, an untold number of deaths. As for the so-called US Red Scare fueled by McCarthy, he was accused of generating fear in everyone for no reason because of all these communists in the government. But they're really not there, his critics said. Well, they were there. The evidence is overwhelming. J. Edgar Hoover, FBI director, wrote in 1957, "Communism is the major menace of our time. Today it threatens the very existence of our Western civilization, as it is doing now." Yet some of the investigation of Huick were admittedly questionable. The temptation to become intoxicated with power and overstep one's authority is great. Rational thinking and a respect for human rights must prevail. Yet US constitutional law is now routinely broken. According to WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, of course, William Binney and Edward Snowden of the National Security Agency. During the McCarthy era, the proof of guilt at the top was much clearer than at Salem, also than today in these surreptitious post-Cold War times. But in China, the message is clear. Communism is deeply entrenched. General Secretary Xi Jinping has obtained dictatorial powers. Jim Rickards has written, President Xi is an actual dictator, not a presumed one. China slaughtered thousands of innocent protesters at Tiananmen. Nonetheless, the dilemma remains how to determine the truth. The residents of Salem Village had a hard time getting at it. McCarthy did go after it, but was vilified by the media and public as a fabricator of lies. This smear has continued to the present day. You can find many books written not long ago or very recently who vilify McCarthy, criticize him for being a fearmonger, you see, seeing, a witch hunter, you see, seeing communists that really aren't there. As for Miller and Kazan, each says he went the way of his conscience, which led them in opposite directions. Eventually, they reconciled and collaborated, but their reunion was bittersweet. They would never be close friends again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, Professor Stephen Olander. Now the session is open for discussion. If there are some comments from the experts, they are most welcome. Yes, sir.
Professor Olander. Since
you see me?
Since your speech was recorded, did you know that?
Well, I'm not surprised. I
So
didn't
it's
know
okay. Since if you plan to visit China, do you plan to visit China?
No.
after your speech.
Not very soon.
So you need to be careful about this.
Yeah, well, I mean, we cannot mince words forever. Sometimes we have to come out and say what everybody knows. This is what I said about China of today is not a surprise to anybody here, I believe, right? And very few of anyone who may hear this this speech will be surprised or shocked by its revelations about present-day China.
Yes, sir.
No, to answer your question, not soon. I won't go to China soon.
Thank you so much. Now let's move on to the last session of today's webinar. May I invite the speaker, Dr. Ashok Sachdeva, Professor and former Chairman, Board of Studies in English, Devi Ahilya University, Indore. May I again request Dr. Shivaji Sargar to chair this session. Professor Sargar is a former head of Department of English from University of Mumbai. So over to you, Dr. Ashok Sachdeva. Hello. Dr. Sachdev, your mic is mute. So will you please unmute?
Dr. Ashok, please unmute yourself. Sachdeva sir, you have to unmute yourself first. Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, sir.
Dr. Ashok Sachdeva, sir, please unmute yourself and then start with your presentation. Can you hear me? Dr. Sachdeva?
Yeah, hello.
Yourself unmute.
Can you hear me, sir? Hello?
Can you hear me, sir?
Hello?
Can you hear me, sir?
Can you listen to me? Hello?
Can you listen to me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
But the screen sharing has stopped.
I'm sharing it with okay. Hello. Hello.
Sir,
Can you see my screen?
Can you see my screen?
no, sir. I think
Is
your
unmute kara.
mute is low. Hello.
Okay.
Ashok is not unmute.
Yes, yes. Dr. Sachdeva, sir, your mic is mute.
Ah,
Please unmute and then you start your
Hello. Hello.
okay, okay,
Hello.
okay. Now,
Hello.
ah,
Hello. Can you hear me, sir?
Can you? Yes, sir.
I don't know what happened actually.
I don't know. I don't.
Sir, you are using two devices, no? So therefore,
Yeah.
there is a kind
No,
of
sir.
echo.
Yeah. I had to come to this mobile device because I was unable to share my PPT from laptop. It was taking me to the yeah. So I'm sharing the screen from another device.
Okay, sir.
Okay. I hope it works. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just a minute. I'm beginning by, in the meanwhile, till the PPT comes, let me, I hope if I am able to present this, I don't know whether you are able to see this PPT or not. Hello?
Not yet now. Not yet, sir.
Okay. Hello? Hello? Hear me, sir?
Hello.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Ashok sir, I think there is some issue with your network.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Even if you can carry on your presentation without sharing the screen, it won't be a problem for us.
Okay, okay, sir. Okay, sir. Yes, sir. Sorry for. Actually, I hope I'm audible. I'm sorry
Yes.
for the delay. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. You are audible. Yeah.
Okay.
Sir, again you have become inaudible.
Yes. Now, sorry for
Ashok
delay.
sir,
I hope.
yes sir, please.
Yes, sir. I'm audible to you, sir. Hello?
Yes, you are audible. But I request
Okay. But I'm
switch video and use only one device for this one because there is an internet issue.
No, sir, your voice is not audible, Dr. Sachdeva. You are not audible. Hello?
Just a minute, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Just a minute. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Please. Just a minute, sir. Just a minute, sir. Just hardly 1 minute. Please let me in through my laptop.
Okay.
Please let me in.
Yes, 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 sir.
Okay, sir.
Yes, sir. You are there.
Joining the computer. Hello. Yeah, I'm sorry for the delay. Extremely sorry for the delay.
Yes.
Actually, a very good evening to all of you. Honorable Sir Dr. Gerald Kapchik, Professor Stephen, and Professor Shivaji Sargar, the principal of the college, Dr. K. Shinde, Mane Sir, Professor Mane. I'm thankful to you for giving this platform to speak to you and sharing the... Actually, my topic is today, literature and pandemic. I'm sorry that I couldn't share my PPT with you. There is some OneDrive or Google Drive issue and not able to share directly from my laptop or from mobile. So I think what the issue is there, they are asking me to first share the file with OneDrive or Google Drive and then share it from their screen. I think there is some technical issue with that, but it's okay. Actually, and the examples of pandemic have been already there, have been very much there in literature. For example, Jack London, which was there in 1876 to 1916, he was a US writer and journalist, and he author of the classic novels. And he wrote some of the novels like The Call of the Wild in 1903, White Fang in 1906, and he also wrote The Scarlet Plague, and it was written by Jack London in 1912. And this is one of the best examples of post-apocalyptic fiction novel. So in modern literature, as we can see, pandemics can bring forth deeply rooted fears and modify human behavior greatly. Because I think you can see that this pandemic has brought about great metamorphosis in the society. And as you can see, there have been drastic changes in almost all walks of life. And it has affected not only the field of education, the social life, psychological life, and the economy and whatnot. So there are diverse and multidimensional aspects of this. So in modern literature, pandemic can bring forth deeply rooted fears and modify human behavior. So as Dr. Gerald Kapchik has said, that there is a resurrection. So there is a blessing in disguise as well in this aspect. So let's see how things have... This has almost about the reactions of the people to the contagion and death. Actually, we see that there is no vaccine till now, and no medicine could help, and no one could stop it from striking. The only way to escape was to avoid contact with infected person. This has been there 100 years ago when there was outbreak of plague, and the same situation is there nowadays. So you can see these are I think the examples are found in the Bible also. For example, Exodus 9.14 Numbers 11:33 and the Psalms 89. These examples are there where it was seen as God's punishment to sins. And therefore, the casual relationship between plague and sin was seen in the Greek literary text. And also there is an example of Homer's Iliad, and also Sophocles, Oedipus and the King, 429 BC. There's one more example. Almost 100 years ago, the Scarlet Plague, also written by this Jack London, feels contemporary. It feels true even now in the sense that it allows modern readers to reflect on the worldwide fear of pandemic, a fear that remains very much alive. And also, this pandemic does not discriminate between the good and the evil, but brought about the loss of all social conventions and a rise in a selfishness and avarice. But, and the greed has also, but the Dr. Gerald has given a wonderful solution that we need to be empathetic. We have to share our feelings and emotions, and we have to be sharing and caring, and there should be a sort of empathy. And the reason, I think the solution light, he talked about resurrection. The solution lies in T.S. Eliot's, as he suggests, that da means to control, to sympathize, and to give. These are the three terms that can bring about the solution. Another example is there during Chaucer's time. Geoffrey Chaucer, who is the father of English poetry, or the father of English literature, as you may say, because he found English brick and left it marble, and he brought English to the print media. You can say 1340 to 1400 almost, 14th century England. He also emphasized human behavior. The fear of contagion increased, such as avarice, greed, and corruption. So human reactions to the plague are also the central themes of historical titles like A Journal of the Plague Year by Daniel Defoe in 1659 to 1731. So these are the literary examples which are already there. And there is a long detailed narrative of events, anecdotes, and statistics regarding the Great Plague of London of 1665. So there's another example, The Betrothed and History of the Columns of Infamy by Italian novelist Manzoni, 1785 to 1873. So these are some of the examples down the literary tradition that how the literature has been able to depict and responses of human life in the literature. Another one is 1826 by English novelist Mary Shelley. She was Mary Shelley was 1797 to 1851, and that was one of the apocalyptic novels telling a future world that had been ravaged by a plague. A few persons appear to be immune and avoid contact with others. In 1842, there was an American poet, well-known poet, novelist Edgar Allan Poe, 1809 to 1849. He published The Mask of the Red Death. And you can see that in the literary tradition of the plague by focusing only on the metaphorical element of the topos. The personification of the plague you find in this novel. And I'm cutting short and giving you the gist of these literary examples. So the people were soon frightened by the there's a line, the people were soon, I just quote, that the astonishing quickness with which the germ destroyed human beings and the fact that it inevitably killed any human body it entered from the moment of the first signs of it. So there is a description which I would like to read. The heart began to beat faster and the heat of the body to increase. Then came the scarlet rash, spreading like wildfire over the face and body. Most persons never noticed the increase in heat and heartbeat, and the first they knew when the scarlet rash came out. Usually they had convulsions at the time of appearance of the rash, but these convulsions did not last long and were not very severe. The heels became numb first, and then the legs and the hips, and when the numbness reached as high as he died. So this is a very beautiful description of the person who is dying of this such deadly disease. So is the case with, I think we can equate, this is equally true in contemporary times. The fears are the same, and the neurosis is the same, and therefore this has been described earlier in literature, and so the literature produced during the last 6 months at local level, global level, we can see the similar kind of reflections. London wrote of the rapid decomposition of corpus, as we have seen in the New York, There was no place to bury people. And we have seen in the Europe also, in the UK also, that it was the burning. And even in India, that how those who were COVID sufferers, coronavirus sufferers, how they met with their horrifying end. So the decomposition of corpuscles, which immediately released millions of germs, accelerating the speed of the disease and causing problems for the scientists who were not able to quickly find a specific treatment. So I think there's one more reason. Earlier, 100 years ago, you can say in England, when plague was there, you can see that media played a very important role. At that time, what was media? The newspapers were there, the telephones were there, and magazines and other such means of communication. But in this particular coronavirus pandemic, we are more geared up, more equipped with, because we have all the technology and technological tools and platforms at our disposal. We have WhatsApp, Instagram, messengers, Facebook, and whatnot. And one thing you can see that media has flowed. If you listen to, I think this pandemic has also brought about, you can say, a common code of conduct, a common way of thinking, uniformity of thinking, in the sense that if you listen to the Radio Australia, television channel, satellite channel Australia, France, World France, France TV, or Russian TV, or for that matter, BBC or Al Jazeera, they talk about COVID-19. During the last 9 months or 10 months, they have been sharing the common language, common approaches, and the common news, which is universal to all, common to all the countries. When you just shuffle the channels and you see the similar kind of news coming from all over corners of the world. So this has affected our language during the last 10 months. Our language has also gone a great metamorphosis. You know, there have been on all the newspapers of the world, in all the channels of the world, we see that the common vocabulary has come with the high frequency, and the words are being added to the dictionary. So coronavirus has affected, number one, I'm taking number one, media, then I'll be taking up language. So coronavirus has led to an explosion of new words and phrases, and that helps us cope with the pandemic in terms of sharing, as Dr. Gerald says. So global Englishes, world Englishes, there's a common core vocabulary, and this is affecting our day-to-day language, and this is also affecting our course curriculum, seminars, webinars. So similar kind of, even the course curriculum which will be prepared now will have a different kind of these. For example, the words like quarantine, isolation, self-isolation, so many, the alienation, physical distance, social distance, all these words have come up. List is endless. So lexicographers, you can say, are working from home and inventing words, contributing to the creation of new words during the outbreak of COVID-19. So this can be seen in word formation, morphological derivation, lexical, even the syntax has changed. Even the semantics and the old words are also getting new dimensions, new meanings. They're open-ended in this COVID. So I would like to say that COVID-19, even the COVID-19, this word is new, and it shows the coronavirus. This is 2019. WFH shows the working from home, stay at home. I'll mention a few words. The list is endless. One is COVIDiot. COVIDiot, C-O-V-I-D-I, idiot. Before idiot, I'm prefixing COV, which is a COVIDiot is a combination of coronavirus and idiot, a person who does not follow the directives of social distancing and behaves like an idiot. This is the meaning. And therefore, and someone who ignores the warnings regarding public health or safety. Another word is COVIDient, dient, and before this I'm prefixing COVI, which shows a combination of coronavirus and obedient. It shows the obedience. Infodemic is another word which has emerged, and PPE, you know it well. So list is endless, and newspapers are all full of them. So some of the, if I discuss a glossary of such terms, you can see that coronavirus, COVID-19, epidemic, pandemic, infodemic, quarantine, self-quarantine, isolation, all these words are common. Symptomatic, asymptomatic, incubation, community spread, communicable, contagion, morbidity, mortality, immunity, whatnot, and social distancing. Even the old words are acquiring here the new meaning. Another word is pandemic. Before pandemic, we are writing S, letter S. It has become spandemic. Spandemic may be the habit of spending money out of fear during the coronavirus. Another word is virtual being, which has come. Virtual being, because you can see this technology has connected us all. We are not physically present with each other. Another word is corona vision, which is a noun which shows that the problems with eyesight that began or worsened during the COVID-19 pandemic period and lockdown, because we were all the time sitting glued to the television, computer, mobile, and so on. And this has affected our lifestyle as well. So I skipped many of the parts. So you can see that the 1 in 5 adults in the country, they think their vision has become worse in the past 4 months, and this corona vision. Even I think this was there about the sanitizers, they are affecting our eyes very badly. Another word is homecation, because we are having vacation at home, and it has been used in the Western world in number of connotations, and there is a nacation. N-A-C-A-T-I-O-N. Nacation is a type of holiday where people do not have to wear clothes for most of the time as they are there on the beach. Revenge spending, because we couldn't spend during the lockdown, so this is a revenge spending. Social commerce, so such terms are coming up. This was about the language part. But if we see that this coronavirus has affected our literature in terms of most of the literature that is there, stories, short stories, poems, if you can see, read now, they talk about health, they talk about hygiene and fitness and their dietary habits and about the various formulas to devour so that you are free from, you can improve your immunity. So there have been lifestyle changes. Even the lockdown word is a new, stay at home sort of a things. And therefore social life has also, and it has brought about changes in our looks, because wearing masks, our dress code has changed. We have become, and during the lockdown period, so it has changed our looks and look out both. Now look out, both positive, negative, as we can see, depending upon that. But the social distancing has also brought about social isolation. Alienation has led to the neurosis, and we have seen that many people have been suffering from depression as well. And due to loneliness and lack of human interaction, and aging process had rather, increased. There are psychological aspects, no doubt, both plus and minus, but there are people with greater willpower as well. Even the journalism, newspapers, media, satellite TV, we see colossal changes all over. The virtual world, we see now we are, like Dr. Gerald also talked about that we are more in the virtual world, and we are making use of the technology and ICT and various channels for the education and teaching purposes. So if you had asked me, if I had asked the university that kindly please allow me to conduct PhD Viva online, perhaps they wouldn't have agreed to it, because that was something, a new concept. 10 months ago, if I had requested my own university to conduct Viva online, but now they are asking us to conduct, so it has brought about a change in the thinking. If in online conferences 10 months ago, if there were a conference in Gujarat, I was spending 3 days in Gujarat, 1 day in going and 1 day in coming both, and then rushing to Mumbai for another 2 days, 5, 7, 10 days out of my place, and coming back tired for another 3 days. So this is a blessing in disguise that today we are hearing. Today with us, there are international personages, academicians, stalwarts with us, Dr. Jayaran Kapchik, Stephen, Mike Chung with us, and we are able to listen to them. And they have acceded to our request, and we are sharing and we are learning from them. Even if we talk about literature and films, even the cinema halls were closed. One remarkable thing is that this coronavirus has reduced, like death is a great leveler. So this coronavirus, this pandemic has been a great leveler in the sense that it didn't differentiate between the rich and the poor. Apologies, I'm just talking in another context. See the big infrastructure malls, super malls, big theaters, big buildings. I visited malls quite a few days ago. Before I saw they were all vacant. Now the roads are flooded with the traffic, but the malls are empty. There's such big infrastructures, big buildings, great architectural buildings have lost their meaning and significance, and we are more in the virtual world. Even the big, exuberant, ostentatious parties, big cocktail parties are non-existent for the last 9, 6, 7, 8, 10 months. So it has put an end, it put a stop to the ostentatious shows, and you can see. So there are OTT platforms. Cinema halls were closed. The movies are being released in the OTT platforms. But you see their language, the plays are coming up, and it is also changing the habits of the people, that only the big budget stars have been reduced to the mediocre stars, and therefore only superstars, few 4 or 5 superstars, people will go only to watch them in the cinema halls. Otherwise, that trend is also decreasing, and we can see that people are more building up their home theaters, their own studios, and their own online classes at home. And so there are both pros and cons. The list is endless, but coronavirus, I think it is changing. Can we compare it with the second coming? Can we compare it with the birth of the second Jesus Christ? Can we compare it with that? Is it has come to teach us a lesson, to mend our ways, to purge off our sins, to resurrect, and so that we be more hygienic, more clean, more with the cleaner habits, and both in the sense that we should live the life of a human being and respect and regard the lives of other people, and get rid of all the vices. And therefore, that's why we are taking greater care of our health and hygiene and fitness. We are washing our hands time and again. We are taking care of our health. Otherwise, we were very negligent of this. And also, it has brought about a revolution. On one hand, is a paradoxical. On the one hand, there is a social distancing. On the other hand, is connecting us together. So I think there has to be a balance. But sometimes I feel that the advantages and the merits outweigh. But sooner or later, we will be able to conquer this coronavirus. But at the same time, the losses that we have suffered are pathetic. But maybe in the future, the losses that we have incurred are unsurmountable. But we see that in the next times to come, we can see that it's going to change our way of life, and it has almost changed our life. With this, I'm thankful to you, Dr. Shivaji Sarkar. I beg my sincere apologies for detaining you for quite some time because I was unable to share my PPT. I wish I could have sent it to you through email so that you could have shared it on the screen. And I'm sending you right now so that, and I'm thankful to the college management, Principal Dr. K. Shinde. I'm thankful to Dr. Gerald Kapchik, who was with us this evening, and all the dignitaries and the academicians like Dr. Stephen and Mike. I have met Mike in Mumbai last year. We had a wonderful time together. And Shivaji is our connecting link. He is the unifying force, unifying link, who has brought us all together on this platform. Thank you so much, and my sincere apologies.
Thank you, sir. Now the session is open for discussion. If there are some comments from the participants and delegates, they are most welcome. Yes, sir. Dr. Stephen.
Yeah, well, one. Huh? Okay.
You're good.
One word I've heard or read a number of times is plandemic. I don't know if you mentioned that. I don't remember you mentioning that. But pandemic, in other words, this was all planned by the powers that be in order to control us and manipulate our lives. Just mentioned that. And a few other works dealing with plague. I don't think you mentioned. One is Boccaccio. Boccaccio, he has his courtiers and their ladies go to a certain mansion or castle and during the plague and tell stories to each other, right? And another one is Camus, called The Plague, right? Camus, the French writer, contemporary of Jean-Paul Sartre, right? Well, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
I'll make a quick comment, if you'll forgive me. On the issue of language, language does not exist in isolation of social relations. So 2 points. First of all, I live next door to the United States, and of course we inject CNN on an ongoing basis, not Fox News. And what we discover is that indeed there is disagreement about the meaning of a fundamental language, the meaning of masks, the very meaning of social distancing. So language can take on a political aspect and then be at the service of the political aspect. That's number one. Number two, when we think about the difference between the 1918 and this current plague, so to speak, one thing has changed, and Marshall McLuhan draws our attention to it indirectly. And he pointed out that a big change in effect, and before this is the internet, he never imagined it, that what's happened is that in 1918, information came to people from resources, whether it was a newspaper, there was no television, there was no radio, it came down from above. And so people could use that information or not, avail it themselves of it or not. But with the development of the internet, it moves both ways. And on social media platforming, you can actually have the insubordination of social organization and the meaningful use of language by subgroups who hold on to notions like pandemic, where it's an intentional attempt by subversive forces to control us. So language can never be divorced from society, and both of them can never be divorced from the nature of the electronic transmission or source of transmission available to us. So, Ashok points out very important changes in language, new language available to us. I'm simply pointing out there's a politicization of language, number one, and there's this new reality where I can send something out on the internet or speak to you guys, and I can send something in good faith, but yet people can be performing in bad faith. Therefore, in a sense, putting language back in the closet and not using it for the purpose of social health. Thank you.
Yes. Anybody else, please? Okay. Dr. Mane, is there any question in the chat box?
I just want to mention that I am very happy to enjoy Professor Ashok Sachdeva's great talk on the pandemic influencing the language and the literature. You did a perfect job. I hope that the recording can be shared to more scholars. It is a superb speech. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Over to Dr. Shivaji Sargar, sir. There are no questions in chat box, actually.
Okay, fine. So, good morning, Dr. Kopchek in Canada, our new friend now. And good evening to all the people from other parts of the country. My co-research persons, Dr. Mike, Dr. Oland, and Dr. Ashok Sachdeva. The organizing college, Karmi Bhaura Patil College, Pandharpur, and the principal, Dr. Kundlik Shinde, and of course, the former principal of the college, Dr. Ashok Boite, who was also the Pro Vice Chancellor of Shivaji University, Kolhapur. My friend from the Department of English, Karmavir Patil College, Dr. Samadhan Mane, who is also the IQAC coordinator and RUSA coordinator of the college. Friends, the present webinar, I believe, is a very important, essential opportunity for all those young scholars who wish to know more about various intricacies related to the literature, language, culture, and pandemics. Not only during this, say, COVID-19 pandemic situation, but it is also the same case with the previous ones that the world has faced bravely. Friends, it's really an unfortunate situation in our history. In the past, our forefathers have faced similarly serious situations that endangered the human life. In the 20th century itself, we have faced 12 wars that affected the lives of millions of people. Human life, is the mixture of various ups and downs, fortunes and calamities, and the good and the bad experiences, which have, of course, got reflected in one or the other form in different types of arts. Similarly, the socio-political conditions of, say, Victorian period that have got reflected in the novels of the time. On the same lines, we have African American literature, we have partition literature in India, both sides of the border, of course, India and Pakistan. In the 1947, 1950s. So we can say that all these socio-historical events in the lives of people, they have given birth to the literature specific to its time and happenings. So naturally, the time which the people all over the world at present age are facing is definitely going to affect the culture and literature of the coming years. The economy, of course, it has got affected by the present situation. I don't want to speak anything about the economic situation, but we have the people Giovanni Boccaccio, who came up with his very important work, the Decameron, speaks about the similar situation. And then we have Jack London and his The Scarlet Plague, Stephen King and his The Stand. All these books which have come to us from the West. Besides, we have also some Eastern people, writers, who have written their works on the similar kinds of, like for example, we have in Hindi literature, we have Phaneshwar Nath Renu and his very beautiful story, Pahalwan Ki Dholak. We have Munshi Premchand and his short story Idga, wherein he speaks about the similar situation in the life of the protagonist. Then we have a story by Master Bhagwan Das named Plague Ki Chudel, which speaks about the effects of pandemic or epidemic on the life of the protagonist. Similarly, in the present day Indian English literature, there are some really interesting books like Siddharth Vigu's just released Love in the Time of Quarantine, wherein the writer, he has got inspired by the march of a migrant worker family that has nowhere to go, and to write his work of fiction, Gigu has selected the life of that family. Similarly, we have Shobha and her ebook Living and Other Stories, Lockdown License. So all these books, we can understand how these books, how these works of literature, they have definitely affected the kind of way we are in which we are thinking, or the way in which the people of more sensible minds and hearts, like the writers we just I have mentioned, their lives have been affected. But what I want to say is that there are many more positive or negative effects of the pandemic which are taking place all around us, and they are required to be recorded in the form of literature. And of course, people like us, they are doing this. So whether these incidents would be recorded or not, one thing is very quite clear for all of us. What I feel is humanity has overcome many serious events in the past. We have defeated those adverse occasions and moved ahead on a positive note. And now And what I believe is this time also we will defeat this COVID-19 and we'll be able to move ahead and lead our normal lives soon. With this positive note, I would like to conclude. And it's now over to Dr. Mane.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. And I am very much aware that all of you have made a huge effort to join us today. So on behalf of Projectionist Sanstha's Karmavir Bhaurav Patil Mahavidyalaya and the Department of English,
Unmute Zara.
now I request Assistant Professor Mr. Wagdare Dhananjay to express vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Samadhan Mane, sir. Good evening to one and all. On behalf of Department of English of Projectionist Sanstha's Karmavir Bhaurav Patil Mahavidyalaya, Pandharpur, I would like to express my sincere gratitude towards the chief guest and keynote addressee for this webinar, Dr. Gerald Kapchik, Professor, University of Toronto, Canada, for his valuable guidance and keynote address, and also to Professor Yuan-Shan Chung, President, Apamala Taiwan University, and also to Dr. Stephen Hollander, National University, Taiwan, and to Dr. Ashok Sachdeva, former chairman, BOS in English, Devi Ahilya University, Indore, and especially to our mentor, Dr. Shivaji Sargar sir, co-organizer for this international webinar, for his overall support, and also especially to our honorable principal and president of this program, Dr. K.H. Shinde Sahib, for his valuable guidance and inspiration for the success of this program. Thanks also to the advisory committee of this webinar. Thanks also to the Professor C.J. Raskar, Vice Principal, Faculty of Arts and Head, Department of English, and to Dr. Samadhan Mane, the coordinator for this webinar, for his tremendous efforts for overall success of this fabulous webinar. And thanks also to our faculty members, Professor S.A. Shinde and Professor P.S. Dodhar, for their assistance. And finally, last but not least, to all the participants from overseas and home, and to all the known and unknown persons who have contributed much for the grand success of this webinar. Now, with the permission of President of this program, I declare the conclusion of this webinar. Thank you very much. Good night.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Congratulations to Department of English. Very nice, excellent international webinar.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Sir.
So shall we conclude now, call it a day?
Yeah.